Lily Fletcher's piercing scream went unheard as a rough hand clamped over her mouth. Her body dragged forcefully toward the waiting wagon on the dusty outskirts of Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. The year was 1875, and the frontier town had just begun to bustle with promise when her life was violently upended. "Keep quiet if you want to stay alive," a gruff voice whispered in her ear, the stench of whiskey and tobacco making her stomach turn. Lily struggled against the iron grip of her captor, her honey-blonde hair falling loose from its pins as she was hoisted into the back of the covered wagon. 3 men, all unshaven, with weathered faces hardened by years of lawlessness, surrounded her. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek whom the others called Barton, tied her wrists with coarse rope that bit into her skin. "She'll fetch a fine price at the mining camps," Barton said, eyeing her with a calculating gaze. "Pretty thing like her, them miners haven't seen a woman in months." "Please," Lily begged, her voice trembling. "I have family here. My father will pay whatever you want." The shortest of the men laughed, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Your pa's the reason we're tacking you, miss. Judge Fletcher's been putting too many of our boys behind bars. Time he learned what it feels like to lose something precious." Lily's blood ran cold. Her father, Leonard Fletcher, was indeed the circuit judge who had gained notoriety for his harsh sentencing of outlaws across the territory. She had only arrived in Silver Creek 3 weeks prior, having traveled from Boston to join him after her mother's passing. "Move out," Barton ordered, and the wagon lurched forward. Through the canvas opening, Lily caught a final glimpse of Silver Creek growing smaller in the distance, its promise of a new beginning fading with every rotation of the wagon wheels. Miles from town, as the wagon rumbled along the rutted trail toward the mountains, Lily fought to control her panic. 22 years of proper Boston upbringing had not prepared her for this brutality. She surveyed her captors: Barton, the scarred leader; Phelps, the short one with the yellow teeth; and Jenkins, a silent giant of a man who merely nodded at commands. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning the wagon into a stifling prison. Lily's throat burned with thirst, but she refused to beg. Her father had always praised her stubborn resolve, a quality she'd inherited from him. That resolve would now keep her alive. "Water," Barton finally offered, extending a canteen. "Can't have you dying before we get to Deadwood." Deadwood, the notorious mining settlement in the Dakota Territory. Stories of its lawlessness had reached even Boston's genteel society. Lily's hands shook as she accepted the canteen, her mind racing with possibilities of escape. As the wagon wound through a narrow pass, the sound of approaching hoofbeats caused Barton to curse. "Jenkins, see who's following." Jenkins peered through the canvas opening. "Lone rider, coming fast." "Probably just a traveler," Phelps muttered, but his hand moved to the revolver at his hip. The rider appeared alongside the wagon, keeping pace effortlessly on a magnificent black stallion. Lily caught her breath at the sight of him, broad-shouldered and lean, his face shadowed by a worn leather hat. A red bandana was tied around his neck, and his duster coat billowed behind him like wings. "Ho there," the rider called out, his voice carrying a commanding timbre. "Fine day for traveling." Barton's expression darkened. "Keep moving, mister. We're not looking for company." The rider tipped his hat back, revealing piercing blue eyes that surveyed the situation with unsettling clarity. "Name's Kade Xavier." "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you." Lily's heart pounded. Could this stranger somehow know who she was? Barton's jaw tightened. "This ain't your concern, Xavier. Ride on if you value your life." Kade's gaze found Lily's through the canvas opening, and something passed between them, a silent promise. "I'm making it my concern," he said calmly. The lady doesn't look like she's traveling willingly. Jenkins reached for his rifle, but Kade's hand moved to his holster with lightning speed. "I wouldn't," he warned. "He's alone," Phelps hissed. "We can take him." The moment stretched, taut with tension. Lily held her breath, afraid to hope yet unable to look away from the cowboy's steady gaze. "Last chance to ride away, Xavier," Barton growled. "Funny," Kade replied. "I was about to say the same to you." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion. Barton drew his pistol, but Kade was faster. A single shot cracked through the air and Barton howled, clutching his shoulder. The wagon horses spooked, lurching forward at an uncontrolled pace. Phelps lunged for the reins while Jenkins took aim at Kade. Lily ducked as gunfire erupted around her. She heard Kade's horse thunder past, keeping pace with the runaway wagon. Another shot and Jenkins collapsed backward, blood blooming across his chest. The wagon careened wildly, and Lily struggled to maintain her balance as it bounced over the uneven ground. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Kade riding alongside, his face set in grim determination. "Jump!" he shouted, extending his hand toward her. Now, terrified but seeing no alternative, Lily gathered her courage and lunged toward the opening. For one heart-stopping moment, she was suspended in air, and then strong arms caught her, pulling her onto the saddle. She clung to Kade's solid warmth as his horse broke away from the wagon, which continued its reckless course down the trail. "Hold tight," Kade instructed, his breath warm against her ear as they galloped away. Lily wrapped her arms around his waist, her cheek pressed against the rough fabric of his coat, the scent of leather and pine filling her senses. Only when they had put considerable distance between themselves and the wagon did Kade slow his horse to a walk. The adrenaline that had sustained Lily began to ebb, leaving her trembling. "Are you hurt, miss?" Kade asked, twisting in the saddle to look at her, genuine concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "No, her voice broke, and to her mortification, tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you. They were taking me to Deadwood. They wanted to punish my father." Kade's expression hardened. "Judge Fletcher's daughter, I presume," Lily nodded, surprised. "You know my father?" "Know of him," Kade corrected. "Your disappearance caused quite a stir in town." "I was at the saloon when the news came in. Judge offered a substantial reward for your safe return." Something in his tone made Lily stiffen. "Is that why you helped me?" "For the reward?" Kade's lips curved in a slight smile. "Let's just say it was a fortunate alignment of interests." "The reward is nice, but I've never much cared for men who abduct women." As they rode, Lily studied her rescuer more carefully. Kade Xavier was perhaps 30, with the weathered look of a man who lived in the saddle. His hands on the reins were calloused but steady, and there was an easy confidence to his movements that spoke of capability. Most striking were his eyes, clear blue and watchful, missing nothing. "Are you a lawman?" she asked. Kade chuckled, the sound unexpectedly warm. "No, madam. Just a man who tries to be in the right place at the right time. A bounty hunter, then, sometimes, when the bounty deserves collecting." He glanced back at her. "Other times I'm a cattle driver or a guide. The West doesn't much care what a man calls himself, only what he can do." The sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the landscape in gold. Lily felt the chill creeping into the air and involuntarily shivered. "We'll need to make camp soon," Kade said. "It's too dangerous to travel these trails after dark, especially with those men possibly still on our trail." The mention of her captors sent a renewed wave of fear through Lily. "You think they'll come after us?" "Barton's crew is known for holding grudges," Kade admitted. "But they're also known for valuing their own hides. My guess is they'll lick their wounds before deciding whether you're worth the trouble." They found a sheltered spot near a small creek, nestled among a cluster of cottonwoods that would hide their fire from distant eyes. Kade dismounted with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to spending his days on horseback, then reached up to help Lily down. His hands were strong and warm at her waist, and for a moment she found herself looking directly into his eyes, close enough to notice the flecks of gray amidst the blue. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said, stepping back quickly and smoothing her wrinkled dress, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "Kade," he corrected. "Out here, formality just wastes breath." While Kade tended to his horse, a magnificent animal he called Shadow, Lily knelt by the creek, using her handkerchief to wash the dust and tears from her face. The cold water revived her, bringing clarity to thoughts that had been muddled by fear. She was alive, unharmed, and with a man who, whatever his motives, had risked his life to save her. Yet they were still at least a day's ride from Silver Creek, in territory where law was more suggestion than reality. And the men who had taken her were still out there. Kade built a small fire and produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "Not exactly Boston fare," he said apologetically as he offered her a portion. "I'm grateful for any meal that doesn't come from kidnappers," Lily replied, accepting the simple food. Her first bite reminded her how long it had been since she'd eaten, and she finished her portion quickly. As they sat by the fire, the vast Wyoming night settling around them like a blanket, Lily found herself studying Kade's profile. In the flickering light, shadows danced across the planes of his face, highlighting a small scar that ran along his jawline. "You're staring, Miss Fletcher," he said without looking at her. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was wondering how you came to be on that trail today." "It seems remarkably fortunate." Kade poked at the fire with a stick. "I heard about your kidnapping in town. Judge was offering $500 for your return. I've tracked men like Barton before, knew which routes they'd likely take. So you are a bounty hunter, among other things." He looked at her then, his expression unreadable. "Does that bother you, that I might return you for money?" Lily considered the question. In Boston, such mercenary motives would have been considered vulgar. But here, in this wilderness, survival required a different calculation. "You saved my life," she said finally. "Your reasons are your own." Kade nodded, seeming satisfied with her answer. "Get some rest, Miss Fletcher. I'll take the first watch." "Lily," she corrected, echoing his earlier sentiment. "If formality wastes breath, then I believe we've both earned the right to conservation." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Lily, then, sleep. Tomorrow will be a long ride." Wrapped in the blanket Kade provided, Lily lay near the fire, watching the stars that seemed impossibly bright and numerous in the vast Wyoming sky. Despite the hardness of the ground beneath her and the lingering fear of pursuit, she felt an unexpected sense of security in Kade's vigilant presence. She fell asleep watching him silhouetted against the night, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver, ready for whatever dangers the darkness might bring. Dawn broke with the soft chirping of birds and the distant howl of a coyote. Lily opened her eyes to find Kade already awake, brewing coffee over a freshly stoked fire. The rich aroma made her stomach growl. "Good morning," he said, handing her a tin cup. "Hope you like it strong." The coffee was indeed strong, bitter and bracing, but Lily welcomed its warmth. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," Kade replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "We should reach Silver Creek by nightfall if we keep a steady pace." As they prepared to leave, Kade suddenly grew still, his head tilted as if listening. Without a word, he extinguished the fire and motioned for Lily to remain quiet. "Riders," he whispered. "At least 3 coming from the east." Lily's heart raced. "Barton, maybe, or could be a hunting party." Kade swiftly gathered their belongings. Either way, I'd rather not find out. Come on. They mounted Shadow, Lily sitting behind Kade as they had the day before. Instead of taking the main trail, Kade guided his horse through a dense thicket of trees, following what appeared to be a game trail barely visible to Lily's untrained eye. "You know these lands well," she observed as they emerged onto a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of prairie. "Had to learn," Kade replied. "Out here, not knowing the land is as good as signing your death warrant." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling Lily into contemplation. The Wyoming territory stretched before them in rugged majesty, rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, the land painted in shades of amber and sage under the clear blue sky. "It's beautiful," Lily murmured, almost to herself. "Dangerous, but beautiful." "Like most worthwhile things," Kade agreed. As the day progressed, Lily found herself growing more comfortable with Kade's proximity. The initial awkwardness of clinging to a stranger had faded, replaced by a sense of trust that surprised her. There was something steadying about his presence, a quiet competence that inspired confidence. Around midday, they stopped to rest Shadow and eat a meager lunch of the remaining jerky. Lily stretched her legs, wincing at the soreness from hours in the saddle. "Not used to riding?" Kade asked, noticing her discomfort. "I rode in Boston, but proper ladies don't straddle horses there," Lily admitted. "Side saddle is considered more appropriate." Kade's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Not much use for side saddles out here. Function trumps propriety when your life depends on it." "I'm learning that the West has its own rules," Lily said, thinking of how quickly her Boston sensibilities had adjusted to necessity. "Though I must admit, I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand them." "The rules are simpler than you might think," Kade said, offering her his canteen. "Keep your word, respect the land, don't take what isn't yours, and always, always know where your water is." Lily took a careful sip from the canteen. "You make it sound straightforward. The principles are, the living of them isn't always." Kade's expression grew distant. "I've seen good men break under the harshness of this country, and I've seen scoundrels thrive in it. Which are you?" The question slipped out before Lily could consider its boldness. Kade looked at her with surprise that quickly gave way to a rueful smile. "I reckon that depends on who you ask. To the law in some territories, I'm trouble. To others, I'm a solution to their problems." "And what does Kade Xavier say of himself?" He considered this, squinting at the horizon. "I'd say I'm a man trying to make his way honestly in a world that doesn't always reward honesty." He turned back to her. "But enough about me. What brings Judge Fletcher's daughter to Silver Creek?" "Boston seems a far cry from Wyoming territory." "My mother died last year," Lily said softly. "Consumption. After she was gone, there was nothing keeping me in Boston. My father has been asking me to join him for years, but Mother never wanted to leave civilization." She looked around at the wild landscape. "I can understand her reluctance now, but I also see why my father loves it here. There's a freedom to this place." "Freedom and danger often ride together," Kade observed. "Yes," Lily agreed. "I'm learning that too." They continued their journey, the terrain gradually becoming more familiar to Lily as they approached Silver Creek. By late afternoon, Kade's earlier prediction proved accurate. They could make out the distant silhouette of the town nestled in the valley below. "We'll be there within the hour," Kade said. "Your father will be relieved." A complicated emotion passed through Lily at the mention of her father. Relief at returning to safety mingled with an unexpected reluctance to end her time with Kade Xavier. In the span of a day, this mysterious cowboy had transformed from stranger to protector to something she wasn't quite ready to name. "Will you stay in Silver Creek?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "For a bit," Kade replied. "I have business with the stagecoach company. They're hiring guards for the Yosemite. Run too many robberies lately." "Yosemite?" Lily asked. "In California." "That's right. Beautiful country, or so I hear. Never been that far west myself." He glanced back at her. "Your father would likely approve of such honest work." The implication that she might care about her father's approval of Kade's profession wasn't lost on Lily. "My father judges men by their actions, not their occupations." "Then I hope my actions have spoken well enough," Kade said, with a hint of something that might have been uncertainty. As they approached Silver Creek, the town came alive with activity. Their arrival didn't go unnoticed. Heads turned, and whispers followed them down the main street. Lily was acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, and the fact that she was riding behind Kade, her arms around his waist in a manner that would have scandalized Boston society. They stopped in front of the courthouse, a sturdy two-story building that served as both judicial center and her father's residence. Before Kade could help her dismount, the doors burst open and Judge Leonard Fletcher rushed down the steps, his normally composed demeanor abandoned in his haste to reach his daughter. "Lily," he cried, his voice thick with emotion. "My God, child!" Kade helped her down, and Lily ran to her father, embracing him with tears streaming down her face. The fear and tension of the past 24 hours finally released in a flood of relief. "I'm all right, Father," she assured him. "Thanks to Mr. Xavier." Judge Fletcher, a tall, imposing man with silver-streaked dark hair and the same hazel eyes as his daughter, turned to Kade with profound gratitude. "Mr. Xavier, I am forever in your debt. Name your price, the reward stands, and I would gladly double it." Kade dismounted, removing his hat in respect to the judge. "The agreed-upon sum will be sufficient, Your Honor." Of course, of course." The judge beckoned to his clerk, who had followed him outside. "Wilkins, see that Mr. Xavier is paid immediately." He turned back to Lily, examining her for injuries. "What happened, my dear? Who took you?" "Barton's gang," Kade answered before Lily could speak. "They meant to use her to force your hand on some legal matters, I suspect." The judge's face darkened. "Elijah Barton, I should have known. That man has been a thorn in the side of justice for years." He looked at Kade with newfound interest. "You're familiar with his operations." "Our paths have crossed," Kade said neutrally. "Father, Mr. Xavier saved my life," Lily interjected, sensing her father's scrutiny. "He tracked the wagon and faced 3 armed men alone." Judge Fletcher's expression softened slightly. "Then I'm doubly indebted to you, Mr. Xavier. Please join us for dinner this evening. It's the least I can do to express my gratitude." Kade hesitated, his eyes meeting Lily's briefly. "That's very generous, Your Honor, but I shouldn't impose." "Nonsense," the judge insisted. "I would hear the full account of my daughter's rescue, and Lily's housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, makes the finest roast beef west of the Mississippi." Lily found herself holding her breath, hoping Kade would accept. After a moment's consideration, Kade nodded. "Then I'd be honored, sir. Thank you." "Excellent. 8 o'clock." The judge put an arm around Lily's shoulders. "Now, my dear, let's get you inside. You must be exhausted." As her father led her toward the courthouse, Lily looked back at Kade. He stood by his horse, watching her go, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Only when she reached the doorway did he finally turn away, leading Shadow toward the livery stable. Inside the safety of her father's home, Lily was enveloped in the familiar comforts she'd taken for granted before her abduction: a hot bath, clean clothes, and Mrs. Abernathy's fussing attention. Yet as she soaked in the tub, washing away the dust and fear of the past day, her thoughts kept returning to Kade Xavier. He was unlike any man she had known in Boston: direct, unpolished, yet possessing a quiet dignity that commanded respect. She found herself counting the hours until dinner, eager to see him again in different circumstances, away from danger and pursuit. When 8 o'clock arrived, Lily had changed into one of her better dresses, a sage green that complemented her eyes. She'd pinned her honey blonde hair in a simple but elegant style and added a touch of rose water behind her ears. Mrs. Abernathy noticed these extra efforts and raised a knowing eyebrow but said nothing as she put the finishing touches on the promised roast beef. The knock at the door sent an unexpected flutter through Lily's stomach. She heard her father's deep voice welcoming Kade, and then they entered the dining room together. Kade had made efforts of his own. His duster and hat were gone, replaced by a clean, if simple, white shirt and dark vest. His hair, a rich brown with sun-lightened streaks, had been combed, and his face freshly shaven, revealing a strong jawline previously hidden beneath stubble. The transformation was striking, though he still carried himself with the same alert wariness that had kept them both alive in the wilderness. "Miss Fletcher," he greeted her with a slight bow. "You're looking well." "As are you, Mr. Xavier," she replied, noting how his blue eyes seemed even more vivid against his white shirt. "I'm pleased you could join us." Judge Fletcher watched this exchange with interest before gesturing to the table. "Please, let's be seated. Mrs. Abernathy has outdone herself tonight." The dinner began with some initial awkwardness, but the judge's practiced courtroom manner soon put Kade at ease. They discussed the details of Lily's rescue, with Kade downplaying his role and Lily insisting on his bravery. The conversation then turned to Kade's background. "You mentioned you're considering work with the Stagecoach Company," Judge Fletcher said as Mrs. Abernathy served apple pie. "Have you much experience as a guard?" "Some," Kade admitted. "I rode shotgun on the Cheyenne to Deadwood route last year. Before that, I drove cattle from Texas to Kansas." He hesitated before adding, "I've also done some bounty hunting, as your daughter may have mentioned." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Hunting men is dangerous work." "So is judging them, Your Honor," Kade replied with unexpected candor. "We both deal in a certain kind of justice, though your methods are more civilized than mine." Instead of taking offense, Judge Fletcher laughed. "Well said, Mr. Xavier. I've found that honest men speak plainly, regardless of their profession." He studied Kade with newfound respect. "The Yosemite run is treacherous. The Wilton brothers have hit it twice in the last month. Good men lost their lives." "All the more reason for experienced guards," Kade said. Lily, who had been following the conversation with interest, spoke up. "Yosemite is supposed to be breathtakingly beautiful. I've seen photographs in Harper's Weekly." "Perhaps you'll see it in person someday," her father suggested. "Once these routes are safer." "I'd like that," Lily said, her eyes briefly meeting Kade's across the table. As the evening progressed, Lily noticed how her father, initially reserved, had warmed considerably to Kade. The judge respected competence and directness, qualities Kade possessed in abundance. When Mrs. Abernathy brought coffee, the three of them had settled into a comfortable rhythm of conversation that ranged from local politics to the challenges of frontier life. "The West is changing," Judge Fletcher observed. "When I first came to Wyoming Territory 15 years ago, the law was whatever the strongest man said it was. Now we have courts, schools, proper commerce." "Some might say it's losing its soul in the process," Kade remarked. "And what do you say, Mr. Xavier?" Lily asked. Kade considered the question, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I think there's room for both the wildness that makes this country unique and the civilization that makes it livable. The trick is finding the balance." Judge Fletcher nodded approvingly. "A nuanced view, I find myself in agreement. The mantel clock struck 10, and Kade set down his cup. "I should take my leave. You've been most generous with your hospitality, Your Honor." "The gratitude is entirely mine," the judge assured him. "And the invitation extends beyond tonight. You're welcome in this house anytime, Mr. Xavier." As Kade rose to depart, Lily stood as well. "I'll see Mr. Xavier out, Father." The judge's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Of course, my dear. Good night, Mr. Xavier." Lily walked Kade to the front door, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been during their day of shared danger. "Thank you again," she said softly. "Not just for the rescue, but for being kind afterward. Some men might have been less respectful." Kade's expression grew serious. "I would never dishonor someone I've sworn to protect." "Is that how you saw me?" "As a duty." He studied her face in the soft lamplight of the entryway. "At first," he admitted, "but duties don't usually have clever minds and brave hearts, or eyes that remind a man of summer meadows." The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, took Lily's breath away. "Mr. Xavier, Kade," he corrected gently. "I believe we established that formality wastes breath." "Kade," she amended, his name feeling intimate on her lips. "Will you really stay in Silver Creek for a while?" "I've given my word to the stage company. 3 weeks at least, until they hire more guards." He placed his hat on his head but didn't immediately turn to leave. "Perhaps, if your father permits, I might call on you properly during that time." Lily couldn't suppress her smile. "I'd like that very much." Kade tipped his hat, his own smile briefly illuminating his face. "Good night, Lily." "Good night, Kade." She watched from the doorway as he walked down the street toward the boarding house, his straight-backed figure gradually disappearing into the darkness of Silver Creek's main thoroughfare. Only when he was completely out of sight did she close the door, leaning against it with a flutter of anticipation for what the coming weeks might bring. True to his word, Kade called on Lily 3 days later. Her father, perhaps recognizing something in his daughter's demeanor, raised no objections when she announced her intention to show Kade around Silver Creek. Judge Fletcher had taken the Cowboy's measure and found him worthy, which was all the permission Lily needed. They walked along the boardwalk that lined the main street, Lily pointing out buildings of interest: the schoolhouse where she had begun teaching the local children, the mercantile where goods from the east arrived monthly, the small church that doubled as a community meeting hall. "Silver Creek has grown considerably in the past few years," Lily explained. "Father says it's positioned to become an important stop between Cheyenne and the Montana territories." "Your father has vision," Kade acknowledged. "Not all frontier towns survive their first decade. It takes the right kind of leadership." They stopped at the town's small park, where a few benches had been placed beneath cottonwood trees. As they sat, Lily noticed how Kade positioned himself to view the entire area, his instinctive vigilance never fully relaxed. "Do you ever stop watching for danger?" she asked. Kade looked surprised, then rueful. "Bad habit. In my line of work, letting your guard down can be fatal. It must be exhausting living that way." "You get used to it," he said with a shrug. "Besides, there are moments when it's worth letting go." His eyes met hers. This might be one of them. Lily felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Over the next 2 weeks, these walks became a cherished routine. Kade would finish his duties with the stagecoach company by mid-afternoon, and Lily would conclude her teaching at the schoolhouse. They would meet and walk, sometimes talking for hours, other times enjoying comfortable silence. Kade told her of his childhood in Missouri, his father a blacksmith who had taught him to respect honest work and the value of a man's word. He spoke of riding with cattle drives at 16, of the mentors who had taught him to track and shoot, of the vastness of the territories he had crossed. In turn, Lily shared stories of her Boston upbringing, her mother's gentle guidance, her education at a ladies' seminary, and her secret passion for adventure stories that had made the West seem like a romantic dream rather than the harsh reality she now knew it to be. "Are you disappointed?" Kade asked as they sat by Silver Creek itself, the waterway that had given the town its name. "Now that you've seen the real West," Lily considered the question, watching the current flow over smooth stones. "Not disappointed," she said finally. "Humbled, perhaps. The West in my books was all heroics and grand gestures. The reality is harder but also more genuine. Like the difference between a painting of a mountain and climbing it yourself," Kade suggested. "Exactly." Lily smiled at him, pleased by his understanding. "Though I must admit, there have been moments of genuine heroics as well." Her gaze held his meaningfully. Kade looked away, uncomfortable with praise. "I did what anyone would do." "No," Lily said firmly. "Not anyone. You tracked a wagon across miles of wilderness and faced armed outlaws alone. Most men would have calculated the risk differently." "Perhaps I calculated a different kind of risk," Kade said quietly. "The risk of not acting when I could have." Their conversations often took such thoughtful turns, revealing depths to Kade that contradicted his rough exterior. He was well-read despite his limited formal education, with strong opinions on everything from politics to philosophy. He challenged Lily's thinking in ways that both frustrated and exhilarated her. As their time together extended, Lily became aware of the town's growing interest in their association. Silver Creek was small enough that gossip traveled quickly, and the judge's daughter walking out with the handsome cowboy who had rescued her provided ample fodder for speculation. Some of the town's matrons viewed the situation with disapproval, while others found it romantically fitting. Lily cared little for their opinions. Her feelings for Kade had grown from gratitude into something much more complex, a deepening affection built on mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. The threat of Barton's gang, which had initially cast a shadow over her return to Silver Creek, gradually receded. Reports indicated they had fled north toward Montana territory, likely fearing the judge would organize a posse to hunt them down. Lily began to feel safe again, though Kade never entirely relaxed his vigilance when they were together. 2 weeks after her rescue, Silver Creek held its annual Founders' Day celebration, a festive occasion with music, dancing, and food that brought together folks from miles around. Judge Fletcher, as the town's most prominent citizen, was expected to attend with his daughter, and Lily surprised her father by asking if Kade might accompany them. "I had assumed he would," the judge replied with a knowing smile. "Mrs. Abernathy tells me you haven't stopped talking about him since your return." "Mrs. Abernathy exaggerates," Lily protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "Does she?" Her father's expression grew serious. "Lily, you know I trust your judgment." "Mr. Xavier has proven himself to be a man of character, despite his unconventional background. If you care for him, you have my blessing to pursue the acquaintance." Lily embraced her father, touched by his understanding. "Thank you. I do care for him, though I'm not certain he feels the same." "My dear," Judge Fletcher said with a chuckle, "the man looks at you the way a pilgrim looks at promised land. I may be old, but I'm not blind." The night of the celebration arrived with perfect weather-clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. The town square had been transformed with lanterns strung between buildings, tables laden with food prepared by Silver Creek's finest cooks, and a wooden platform where a small band of musicians played lively tunes. Kade arrived at the judge's home precisely at 7, dressed in what Lily recognized as his finest clothes, a new shirt, a black vest with silver buttons, and boots polished to a shine. He had even trimmed his hair, though it still curled slightly at his collar in a way Lily found endearing. "You look beautiful," he said when she appeared in her blue silk dress, a treasured garment she had brought from Boston for special occasions. "Like a piece of sky come down to earth." Lily laughed, delighted by the poetic compliment from this usually pragmatic man. "And you look quite handsome yourself, Mr. Xavier. Silver Creek's ladies will be swooning." "There's only one lady whose opinion concerns me," Kade replied with unusual boldness, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The celebration was in full swing when they arrived. Judge Fletcher was immediately drawn into conversation with town officials, leaving Lily and Kade to explore the festivities. They sampled Mrs. Peterson's famous apple dumplings, admired the children's artwork displayed on the schoolhouse wall, and listened to old Mr. Hargrove's increasingly exaggerated stories of the town's founding. When the band struck up a waltz, Kade turned to Lily with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Would you care to dance? I should warn you I'm not particularly skilled." "I would love to," Lily said, placing her hand in his, "and I'm an excellent teacher." They joined the other couples on the cleared area before the musicians' platform. Kade's warning proved somewhat accurate. His steps were not as practiced as the Eastern gentlemen Lily had danced with at Boston socials. But what he lacked in polish, he made up for in natural grace and attentiveness to her movements. "You're doing wonderfully," she assured him as they turned to the music. "I have exceptional motivation to learn," Kade replied, his hand warm at her waist, "though I must admit I prefer activities where I'm more competent, such as riding, tracking, shooting." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "Rescuing beautiful women from bandits," Lily laughed, drawing curious glances from nearby dancers. "A specialized skill, but undeniably useful." As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, each dance bringing them closer physically and emotionally. During a lively reel that left them both breathless with exertion and laughter, Lily felt a surge of certainty that this joy, this connection was what she had been seeking without knowing it. When they finally stepped away from the dancers to catch their breath, Kade suggested a walk to the edge of the celebration, where the noise was less overwhelming. They strolled to a quiet spot near the creek, the music and laughter from the town square a pleasant backdrop to the gurgling water. "I leave for Yosemite in 3 days," Kade said after a comfortable silence. "The stage company has hired enough guards to run regular schedules again." Though Lily had known this day was coming, the announcement still caused her heart to sink. "How long will you be gone?" "The contract is for 6 months, Kade replied, studying her face in the distant lantern light. "It's good, steady work." "6 months," Lily echoed, trying to keep disappointment from her voice. "That's a considerable time." Kade nodded, then reached into his vest pocket. "I have something for you, a token, if you will." He withdrew a small object and held it out in his palm, a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a star, suspended on a fine chain. "I had Mr. Simmons, the silversmith, make it. He said stars guide travelers home, and I thought it fitting." Lily touched the pendant with trembling fingers. "It's beautiful, Kade. I'm not a man of means," he said quietly. "I can't offer the kind of life you knew in Boston, but these past weeks have shown me what kind of life I want to build." He took a deep breath. "If you're willing to wait the 6 months, I'll return with a more formal proposition." Her heart raced at the implication. "Are you asking me to wait for you?" "I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be worthy of someone like you," Kade said, his usual confidence giving way to vulnerability. "I know it's presumptuous." "No," Lily interrupted, taking his hand. "It's not presumptuous at all. I would wait, Kade. Gladly." Relief and joy transformed his face. "May I?" he asked, holding up the necklace. Lily turned, lifting her hair so he could fasten the chain around her neck. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they brushed against her skin, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. When the clasp was secure, she turned back to face him, the silver star resting just below her collarbone. "Perfect," Kade murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken feelings. Then, with deliberate slowness, Kade leaned forward. Lily closed her eyes as his lips met hers in a kiss that was both gentle and certain, a promise more binding than words could express. When they returned to the celebration some time later, Lily's cheeks were flushed and the silver star gleamed at her throat, a visible symbol of the commitment they had made to each other. Judge Fletcher, observing his daughter's radiant expression and the protective way Kade kept her hand tucked in his arm, smiled knowingly but said nothing. 3 days later, Kade departed with the westbound stagecoach, leaving Lily with the star pendant, letters to be exchanged through the stage company's postal service, and a promise to return when his contract concluded. Their goodbye was brief but heartfelt, both aware of the watching eyes of Silver Creek citizens. 6 months, Kade said, holding her hands in his. "Not so very long." "I'll count every day," Lily replied, refusing to cry despite the ache in her chest. "Be safe. Always." He squeezed her hands once more before climbing aboard the stage. As it pulled away, he leaned out the window for a final wave, his expression a mixture of regret and determination. Lily touched the star at her throat, watching until the stagecoach disappeared around the bend in the road. 6 months. She would wait and she would hope, and she would prepare for the life they might build together when he returned. The seasons turned from summer to autumn, and Lily settled into a routine dominated by her teaching duties and correspondence with Kade. His letters arrived irregularly, sometimes several at once after being held at various stations along the route. She devoured each one, learning about the magnificent Yosemite Valley with its towering cliffs and waterfalls, the challenges of guarding the stagecoach through mountain passes, and most importantly, Kade's growing certainty that their future lay together. In her responses, Lily shared news of Silver Creek, the Harvest Festival, the expansion of the school to accommodate more children, her father's growing talk of retirement. She wrote of her hopes for their reunion, her plans to improve her riding skills, and her daydreams about the home they might create together. 4 months into their separation, as winter settled over Wyoming territory with bitter cold and deep snow, Lily received troubling news. A stagecoach traveling the Yosemite route had been attacked by bandits. 3 people had been killed, including one of the guards. The letter from the stage company didn't mention Kade specifically, but the mere possibility that he might have been involved in the attack sent Lily into a frenzy of worry. For 2 agonizing weeks, she heard nothing. Then, just as she was contemplating the drastic step of traveling to California herself, a letter arrived in Kade's distinctive handwriting. It was shorter than usual, and his normally steady penmanship showed signs of haste, but the content brought tears of relief to Lily's eyes. "I was on the attacked stage," he wrote. "Took a bullet in the shoulder defending the passengers, but it's healing well. Don't worry, my love. I've had worse. The company has doubled the guards on each run now, and we've had no further trouble. I count the days until I return to you." Lily pressed the letter to her heart, grateful for his survival yet shaken by how quickly happiness could be threatened. The incident reinforced what she had learned during her own kidnapping, that life on the frontier balanced precariously between order and chaos, with death never far from one's door. Winter gradually gave way to spring, and with the improving weather came more frequent letters from Kade. His contract would end in 6 weeks, and his plans were taking shape. He had saved most of his earnings and had an opportunity to buy into a freight business based in Silver Creek, a chance to put down roots while still using his knowledge of the trails and territories. "It would mean a more settled life than I've known," he wrote, "but the thought no longer unsettles me as it once would have. You've shown me that there can be adventure in constancy, Lily. I never thought to find a home in one place, but I've found it in a person instead." As the date of Kade's expected return drew near, Silver Creek buzzed with anticipation almost equal to Lily's own. The town had embraced their romance as a sort of local legend, the judge's daughter and her cowboy rescuer. Young girls sighed over the story, while practical matrons nodded approvingly at the prospect of the handsome drifter finally settling down with a respectable woman. Lily herself alternated between excitement and anxiety. She had changed in the months of Kade's absence, growing more independent and confident in her role as teacher and in her place within the community. Would Kade notice these changes? Would he still feel the same about her? And would she recognize the man who returned after half a year of his own experiences and growth? 1 week before Kade's scheduled arrival, disaster struck Silver Creek. A spring thunderstorm brought lightning that ignited the dry timber behind the town's eastern buildings. The fire spread quickly, consuming the livery stable and threatening the adjacent structures. The entire town mobilized to fight the blaze, forming bucket brigades from the creek to the burning buildings. Lily worked alongside everyone else, her dress soaked and soot-stained as she passed buckets down the line. After hours of desperate effort, they managed to control the fire, but not before it destroyed the stable, damaged the mercantile, and left several families temporarily homeless. In the aftermath, as the town assessed the damage and began planning repairs, a shocking rumor reached Lily through Mrs. Abernathy, who had heard it from the blacksmith's wife. Elijah Barton had been seen in the hills north of town. "It can't be," Lily said, her hand instinctively going to the star pendant she always wore. "Father said Barton fled to Montana." "Well, he's back," Mrs. Abernathy insisted, "and with 3 new men meaner looking than the last bunch, according to Jim Porter, who saw them while hunting." Judge Fletcher confirmed the rumors that evening. "It appears Barton has returned, possibly seeking revenge for his men who were wounded during your rescue," he told Lily gravely. "I've wired the marshal in Cheyenne, but it will be at least a week before he can arrive with deputies." "A week," Lily echoed, thinking of Kade's imminent return. "Father, do you think they know about the stagecoach schedule, about Kade coming back?" The judge's expression was troubled. "I've considered that possibility. The stage routes are published and Barton has had months to plan. If he blames both of you for his men's injuries and his failed scheme." He didn't need to finish the thought. If Barton knew Kade was returning, the stagecoach could be riding into an ambush. And with the town weakened by the fire, Silver Creek itself might be vulnerable to attack. "We must warn Kade," Lily said decisively. "Send a rider to intercept the stage before it reaches the territory." "I've already dispatched young Wilkins," her father assured her. "He's the fastest rider we have. With luck, he'll reach the stage at Fort Laramie and deliver my message." But luck was not with them. 3 days later, Wilkins returned with grim news. He had missed the stage at Fort Laramie by hours, and the route ahead included several places perfect for ambush. "The Broken Ridge Pass is the most likely spot," Wilkins reported. "Narrow trail, high rocks on both sides. If Barton knows what he's doing, that's where he'll strike." Judge Fletcher immediately organized a group of men to ride out and intercept the stage before it reached the pass. Lily, frantic with worry, begged to accompany them. "Absolutely not," her father said firmly. "I've nearly lost you once to Barton's schemes. I won't risk it again." "But Cade would want you safe," the judge reminded her. "We'll bring him back to you, Lily, I promise." Reluctantly, Lily agreed to remain in town. The waiting was excruciating. She paced the house, alternating between prayer and planning what she would say to Cade when not if, she insisted to herself, he returned safely. By the second day, with no word, her nerves were frayed to breaking. She was at the schoolhouse, attempting to distract herself by preparing lessons, when she heard the commotion outside. Rushing to the window, she saw a cloud of dust approaching from the East Riders, moving fast. Her heart leaped to her throat. Was it her father's group returning? Or Barton's men, coming to finish what they'd started months ago? As the riders drew closer, Lily recognized her father at the lead, and behind him, on a horse that wasn't Shadow but moved with similar power, was Cade. He was alive. The relief nearly buckled her knees. She ran from the schoolhouse, heedless of propriety, racing down the main street toward the approaching riders. As they entered the town, Cade spotted her and urged his mount forward, breaking away from the group. He dismounted in one fluid motion and strode toward her, his expression a complex mixture of relief, joy, and lingering tension. They met in the middle of the street, oblivious to the watching townspeople. Lily launched herself into his arms and Cade caught her, lifting her off her feet in a fierce embrace that spoke volumes about the fear they had both endured. "You're safe," she breathed against his neck. "Thank God you're safe." "And you," Cade replied, his voice rough with emotion. He set her down but didn't release her, his hands framing her face as if to reassure himself of her presence. "When your father told me Barton was back." Lily noticed then the state of his clothing, dust covered and torn at the shoulder, a dark stain that could only be blood visible beneath the tear. "You're hurt," Cade shook his head dismissively. "It's nothing. A bullet grazed me during the ambush." "Ambush? Then Barton did attack the stage." Lily looked past him to where her father was dismounting, surrounded by the men from Silver Creek. "He did," Cade confirmed grimly. "At Broken Ridge, just as your father predicted. We were ready for them, thanks to your father's warning. When the shooting started, I recognized Barton among them." His expression hardened. "He won't trouble you or anyone again, Lily. I made sure of it." The implication was clear, and Lily felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that the threat was eliminated, sadness for the necessity of violence, and gratitude that Cade had survived to return to her. "And the others, his men, 2 dead, 1 captured. Your father is bringing him to stand trial." Cade's hands gentled on her face. "It's over, truly over this time." Judge Fletcher approached them, looking weary but satisfied. "Mr. Xavier was instrumental in defending the stage and passengers," he informed Lily. "His experience with Barton's tactics proved invaluable." "I was motivated," Cade said simply, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. "I made a promise to return." The judge smiled. "And you've kept it admirably. Now, I suggest we continue this reunion at home, where Dr. Morgan can attend to that wound properly." As they walked toward the judge's house, Cade kept Lily's hand firmly in his, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. The town watched their progress with open curiosity and approval. The return of their local hero with his beloved creating the kind of moment that would be recounted for years to come. At home, while Dr. Morgan cleaned and bandaged Cade's wound, Lily hovered anxiously nearby. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, tearing through flesh without hitting anything vital. "You're fortunate," the doctor remarked. "An inch to the right, and we'd be having a very different conversation." "I've always been lucky," Cade replied, his eyes finding Lily's across the room. When they were finally alone, Mrs. Abernathy having discreetly withdrawn to the kitchen, and Judge Fletcher to his study to take the prisoner's statement, Kade pulled Lily into his arms again, this time with a gentleness that belied his earlier urgency. "I rehearsed what I would say to you 1,000 times on that stage," he admitted, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "Now that the moment's here, I find words inadequate." "Then don't use words," Lily suggested, tilting her face up to his. Kade needed no further invitation. His lips claimed hers in a kiss that spoke of longing finally fulfilled, of promises kept, and new ones forming. Lily responded with equal fervor. 6 months of waiting distilled into this perfect moment of reunion. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Kade reached into his pocket. "I brought something back from California," he said. "Something I've been carrying since Yosemite." He withdrew a small leather pouch and emptied its contents into his palm, a ring. It was unlike any engagement ring Lily had seen in Boston, where diamond solitaires were the fashion. This ring featured a small, perfect star sapphire set in silver, the deep blue stone catching the light with a 6-rayed star that seemed to move as he held it. "The miners call it a star stone," Kade explained. "When I saw it, I thought of your pendant and of you, my guiding star." He took her left hand, his own slightly unsteady. "Lily Fletcher, will you marry me? Not for rescue or reward, not for duty or honor, but because I love you more than I thought possible to love another person." Tears blurred Lily's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Kade Xavier. I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger where it nestled as if made for her hand. "It's not grand, it's perfect," Lily interrupted, admiring the way the star seemed to dance within the stone. "Absolutely perfect." Their second kiss sealed the engagement, a promise of the life they would build together in Silver Creek, a life that had begun with danger and rescue, but would continue with love and partnership, as vast and enduring as the Wyoming sky. They were married 2 months later in Silver Creek's small church, with Judge Fletcher proudly giving away the bride and the entire town in attendance. Lily wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver, with her mother's lace veil, and the silver star pendant Kade had given her before his departure to Yosemite. Kade, standing tall and solemn in a new black suit, watched her approach with an expression of such naked adoration that several of the town's matrons dabbed at their eyes. "Never seen a man look at a woman like that," Mrs. Peterson whispered to Mrs. Abernathy. "Like she's water in the desert." "That's because she is," Mrs. Abernathy replied sagely. "To him, anyway." Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken in voices that carried clearly through the hushed church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kade's kiss was respectfully brief but filled with promise, earning approving nods from even the most conservative townsfolk. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing and feasting and toasts to the couple's happiness. Judge Fletcher, watching his daughter whirl in her new husband's arms, reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together, a kidnapping that might have ended in tragedy instead becoming the beginning of a love story that would be told in Silver Creek for generations. As the festivities wound down, Kade led his bride toward the small house he had purchased with his savings and improved with his own hands during the months of their engagement. It stood on the edge of town, with a view of the creek and the mountains beyond, a perfect balance between civilization and wilderness, much like the man himself. He paused at the threshold, then swept Lily into his arms to carry her inside, making her laugh with delight. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor he had furnished with a mixture of practical pieces and small luxuries he knew she would appreciate. "Home," Lily repeated, reaching up to touch his face. I never thought I'd find it so far from Boston. Are you happy?" Kade asked, a rare moment of uncertainty crossing his face. "This life is different from what you knew." "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Lily assured him, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "The adventure has only just begun," and it had. Over the years that followed, Kade and Lily Xavier became pillars of the Silver Creek community. Cade's freight business prospered as the town grew, eventually expanding to include stagecoach routes across 3 territories. Lily continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named James Leonard, after both their fathers. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Catherine Elizabeth, with her mother's honey-blonde hair and her father's blue eyes. Judge Fletcher retired as he had planned, but remained an honored presence in Silver Creek until his passing at the age of 78, surrounded by his beloved daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren who adored his stories of the early days of Wyoming territory. Lily never forgot her harrowing experience with Barton's gang, but as time passed, it became merely the dramatic beginning to a story filled with far more joy than sorrow. On the anniversary of her rescue each year, she and Kade would ride out to the spot by the creek where he had given her the star pendant, renewing in private the promises they had made in public. "Did you ever imagine, that day you rode after the wagon, where it would lead?" Lily asked on one such anniversary, 20 years after their first meeting. They sat side by side on the creek bank, watching the water flow as it had when they were young and uncertain of their future. Kade considered the question, his face lined now with experience but still handsome, his hair touched with silver at the temples. "Not specifically," he admitted, "but I knew even then that you were worth following to the ends of the earth." Lily leaned against his shoulder, the silver star still hanging at her throat, complementing the sapphire ring that had never left her finger. "I'm glad you did." "So am I," Kade replied, wrapping his arm around her. "So am I." And in the quiet of the Wyoming evening, with Silver Creek prospering behind them and the wild country stretching before them, they sat together, the Boston judge's daughter and the cowboy who had once ridden beside a wagon until he took it back. Their shared life the greatest adventure either could have imagined.